come back from. So even with 1 week off with the bye, I don't expect Devondre Campbell to be able to play on Sunday. I know technically we've got practice time here tomorrow. We're recording here on Thursday night, so it's certainly possible that he gets out on the field tomorrow. But even if he's able to get out there in a limited capacity, although a veteran, I think Devondre Campbell's a guy that normally he's going to get a full week of practice in if he's going to go on Sunday. So I think we can plan for that to be McDuffie getting another start here this week. On the flip side, on the inside linebacker news, Quay Walker was out there in limited capacity both yesterday on Wednesday and today. So I think that's really good news. Folks might have been concerned after he got taken out of the Raiders game and was unable to return, that could have been a longer term injury. And the fact that he was already out there practicing coming off the bye both days, Wednesday and Thursday, I think Dane is a good sign. And then in addition to that, really everyone else that's listed has been able to practice in a limited capacity. Sounds like it's really good news with Aaron Jones. He said he feels as good as he's felt since he initially sustained the injury. Sounds like they kept him out of that Raiders game more out of an abundance of caution. He tweaked something just a little bit, or not even tweaked, but just didn't feel quite right after practice on Saturday before that game. So obviously there's still a few days to go between now and Sunday, but he was able to participate in pads in the Wednesday practice. So that's, I think, a really encouraging sign, Dane. And then certainly the other one I think we're all going to be keeping an eye on is Jair Alexander was not listed on injury report yesterday on Wednesday, was listed today with limited participation with the back. So that back seems to be something that might be lingering a little bit. So unknown whether that's just maybe some stiffness or a little soreness from returning to practice after having that week off after Wednesday, if he'll be just good to go. But we'll have a better idea. Certainly, if he's carrying an injury designation going into the weekend, that could be a concern there as well.
That's a good point. And yeah, it's, I swear every year we talk about hamstrings, and those are always just brutal and difficult with Aaron Jones or any of the guys we've had over the years with that. But back is about as unpredictable as hamstring, right? Once a guy tweaks it, it's really hard to get back to 100%, especially with the physicality of football. So hopefully Jair is able to go. I know Eric Stokes is inching closer to a return, but I don't expect that quite yet, probably either. So, it's just another week where we may or may not be without Ja. But I'll tell you what, Wags, I'm curious your take. But even if Ja is limited, let's get him out there. If he can go for 20 snaps, 30 snaps, I mean, he's too good of a player. If it's not going to be a crucial long-term injury from playing on it this Sunday, I'm hopeful he's able to go. Denver's had a hard time passing the ball to a large extent this year, and why make it any easier on them? If we can get Ja out even limited, it's going to be huge for this defense.
Yeah, and you mentioned Eric Stokes. It will be interesting to see what they do. I think not exactly tip their hand, but Coach LaFleur did acknowledge that one way to manage Stokes' snaps could be to put him on some of the special teams coverage units. So that could be a way to get him active and out on the field. And as you mentioned, if Ja is not able to go, his full complement or number of typical snaps, defense side of the ball, I'm not sure that you just rotate Eric Stokes in with Jair. However, there's different personnel groupings that you could utilize. And perhaps if you're managing Eric Stokes' defensive snaps, that's a really big deal to have a player of his caliber if they feel like he's ready. Even if it's only in 5, 10, 15 defensive snaps, if Jair Alexander isn't quite 100%, you need to manage him a little bit. Every rep, every snap's going to help. So I think that would be welcome news, certainly, not only for this week with Jair's injury, but just on a broader scheme of things. It's easy to forget how good Eric Stokes looked a few years ago in his rookie season. And certainly it's been a long time since he's been able to get out there on the football field on a game day. So I'm excited. Even if that doesn't come this week, it does look like it's trending in a direction that he'll be out back out on the football field for the Packers in the very, very near future.
It's huge. So, Wags, looking at this week, Packers, as we mentioned, coming off the bye. Denver, for all intents and purposes, they're a professional ball team, but they're not a very good one, right? At the NFL level this year, they're just not. Some fans in Denver might be thinking the same about the Packers, right? At 2-3, only have one more win than Denver. So I ask you this from a Packers fan perspective, as much as a Packer podcast perspective. Not looking for a hot take, just your honest assessment, which you always give on this pod. How important is this game coming out of the bye week? You know, there's a huge difference between 2-4 and 3-3 in the National Football League. You know, how big is this before we go to breaking down offensive, defensive side of the ball? How are you feeling? But also, like, how much weight is in this one?
Well, that's a great question, Dana. And certainly, I guess it depends on what your expectations are for the rest of the season for this Packers team. Certainly, on paper, you look at a Broncos team that's struggling. Yet, even after, moving on from Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, they played probably their best defensive game of the year last week against the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football. And so they're coming off a mini bye themselves. And certainly you can't really take any team for granted in this league, particularly with the inconsistency that the Packers have had on both sides of football. So I think the Packers, quite honestly, have no right to look at any opponent and say we should beat this team and move on to 3-3. They've got to go out and play their best football every week in order to win these games. So they need to focus on themselves. So really what I'm looking for, Dane, is against the Raiders in the last game a couple weeks ago, we talked about a Packers defense that's really struggling to stop the run and a Raiders offense really struggling to get a run game going, albeit with a very talented running back. And the defense did their job in that game and really played well and was able to say, okay, maybe we haven't figured everything out in stopping the run, but in this particular week against an opponent that's really struggling to run the ball, we've been able to figure some things out and do enough to really get that side of the football, figured out to a degree in that particular week. In this matchup, I'm really going to be looking at this Denver Broncos pass defense against Packers pass offense that's been struggling for consistency as well. Now, the Packers run game has really been struggling. There's not been anything inconsistent about that. They've been consistently bad in the run game. But the pass offense for the Packers has shown flashes. They've been good, and then they've been struggling. So this is a Broncos secondary that's giving up 77% completion rate. We all know Jordan Love is last in the NFL amongst quarterbacks that are starting in this league in completion percentage. He talked a little bit about that in his press conference this week, and he acknowledged that obviously he's working to get the ball and get his reads and let guys make plays after the catch, and that's really, I think, something that they're going to be focused on. Now, I don't expect that Jordan Love's going to be afraid to rip it downfield. Yeah. He certainly is pushing the ball downfield in the opportunities that he has. But this Broncos defense certainly can be had through the air, despite the effort that they put up against the Chiefs. But that's Thursday Night Football. And honestly, the Chiefs maybe just haven't been quite as good on offense as they've been in past years. So that might be more of a reputation thing. And on Thursdays, a lot of times offenses seem to struggle in those Thursday night matchups. But Dane, I'm curious what your thoughts are, because sticking with the offensive side of the ball, we've talked an awful lot about the guys up front. Now we've had a mini bye week. Now we've had a full bye week. It seems like we're as healthy as we're going to get with these guys up front, probably for the rest of the season, frankly. So what can you expect to see for this offensive line to get some things figured out and get some cohesion and maybe start to play a little bit better football?
Well, it's a good question. It's something that I think this is a critical week for the team. Maybe not from a playoff, not playoff, whatever, but from a who are we kind of team. They can't be flat, and they need to be able to be a little bit more physical up front. I think one of the big, I don't want to say excuses, but question marks has been, oh, without Aaron Jones, can't get the run game going. But even with Aaron Jones, with some of the poor run blocking that we saw up front, and just kind of a lack of cohesion over the first few games of this team, I'm not sure how successful Aaron Jones would have been in certain situations. So this is going to be a big week. It's going to be, it's important, I think, too, from a coaching staff's perspective. It's important from the guys up front. Rasul Douglas said it. He's like, today or yesterday, he had a quote, something along the lines of like, young's not an excuse. I'm paraphrasing it, but basically like they played 5 games. It's enough. It's the National Football League. Like it's time to step up. So, that's a roundabout way of saying, I don't know what to expect out of this offensive line. We've seen some maneuvering around. We've talked ad nauseum about who we think the best 5 would be up front. And, I think that we're probably going to go with similar to what we had last week prior to the bye, is going to be the 5 up front again. And, I'm hoping that some of the communication breakdowns that we've seen were figured out over this bye to a certain extent. I think we're both on record as saying that this bye week couldn't have come at a better time this year. The offense looked completely out of sorts. I thought play calling didn't look very good. Just across the board, it didn't look very good. So now, we kind of hold our breath a little bit and say, okay, what was figured out? What's going to be problematic going forward? But I'm optimistic. I really am, Wags, that I think that this is an offensive line. Going into the year, we were really high on this offensive line with or without David Bakhtiari. I'm still confident in these guys. We've got some really, really good guys up front. It's time, though, right? It's time, especially against this Denver Broncos defensive front. If not against Denver Broncos, despite only allowing 19 to Kansas City, we've seen how they gave up 70 to Miami. They've been bad. They're 70 in an NFL game. So, we should be able to push them around enough. I don't care if we're on the road. So that's where I'm coming at it from, Wags, is we're a 2-3 team. They're a 1-5 team. But if we can't run against the Denver Broncos, this is going to make for a long season. So it's important that we try to figure that out pronto.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think one thing about this Denver defense, I mentioned their pass defense has been really struggling. But maybe this is the week, kind of the opposite of the defense last week, where, something has to give. Denver's also last in the league defensively in run defense. They're giving up 5.6 yards per carry. They're just getting steamrolled. And something that's interesting, and I don't know what your thoughts on this are, Dane, but just looking game by game, the running backs that they seem to be giving up a lot of that yardage to are not the exact same players that Aaron Jones is, but kind of in the same mold. You look at the Devon Chain. He kind of had his breakout game against the Broncos before he went on IR last week for Miami at over 200 yards. Khalil Herbert had over 100 yards rushing against this Broncos defense when they faced the Bears. Herbert, a nice little running back, but not someone you expect to be giving up over 100 yards rushing to, I think, at this point. Brees Hall had a huge game against this Denver defense. So those guys that are quick and have some of that home run ability seem to be finding big time opportunities against this Broncos defense. Maybe that was a little bit of the downfall for a team like the Chiefs. They're not a team, maybe they've gotten better at times at running the ball, but they didn't do the best. They don't have the strongest run game, I think it's fair to say, Dane. Now, neither do the Packers, at least so far this year. But I gotta think this has got to be a much bigger deal than we think. We really haven't seen Aaron Jones, if he's going to go full-fledged in the game this week, which I do expect that he will do that, since he got hurt in week 1. So this could be, and this is supposed to be our best offensive player. So maybe this is a much bigger deal than we even realize for the guys up front too. You're right. There's been some breakdown, certainly, but Aaron Jones is someone that can make a lot out of very little.
Yeah.
We've seen that over the years, and sometimes all you need is just a little bit of positive momentum in some of those plays, and all of a sudden the defense is on its heels a little bit. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on how big of an impact Aaron Jones truly could make in terms of getting this run game going, in terms of helping this offense find a little bit more consistency, particularly between the 20s, because they've been
Mhm.
fairly good once they've gotten into the red zone. They just haven't had enough opportunities to get down there.
It's massive. It's massive, and it will theoretically impact every phase of the game offensively for the team, not just the run game, but the pass game as well. If the play action becomes a bit of a threat, look out. If they have to bring an extra guy in the box, look out. And as you mentioned, Wags, some of these backs that have torn off big runs against this Denver defense, their average carry is brutally bad for the Denver defense, but also they just give up chunk plays too, big plays consistently, and that's Aaron Jones's bread and butter. So, you mentioned that, and I think that the better that Aaron Jones can do for this Packers team, I then start to look at the defensive backfield in particular for Denver, and there's a guy that I'm going to circle, Damari Mathis, who has just gotten torched by starting opposing wide receivers all season long. And this could be, there's a potential here, for a really strong game from a Christian Watson or a Romeo Dobbs, somebody on the outside, depending on who's matched up with them. But it does, I think, all start with Aaron Jones because, I think Denver can get to the quarterback inconsistently, but enough to be a little bit problematic. But if we're running the ball, that pretty much mitigates what they're going to be able to do from a pass rush perspective. And all that does is a good running game is a quarterback's best friend, especially a young quarterback. So everything, I think, flows through this running game for the Packers. We've had high expectations. They have not been met so far this year, but this is the week. If not now, I don't know when. On the road, early on, I feel confident that this is the week that we can tear off some big runs and allow Jordan Love to settle in then and make some throws, take some shots downfield as well.
Yeah, and I mean, really, if you look last game, we talked about Max Crosby being like the one guy we were
Yeah.
concerned with, and apparently that was for good reason, right? Um, this week, I honestly think it's even more bleak for the opposing team when you look at their depth chart. It's Pat Surtain, and outside of that, Dane, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I feel like I'm someone that has an above average ability to know guys and what's happening around the league. And I legitimately, people can listen to this and say, "Oh, Wags, like really, you don't know any of these guys?" I don't know who any of these guys are aside from Pat Surtain. I legitimately have never heard of any of them.
Mhm.
So maybe Alex Singleton. He's a name I've seen. Other than that, Kareem Jackson, I guess technically, but I mean, these are not guys that are household names
No.
around the league, and so that doesn't mean that they can't play. I will acknowledge that everybody got to get a start somewhere. They haven't shown much so far, so I mean, and honestly, I'm a lot less concerned if your one guy is a boundary corner than if your one guy's a one man wrecking crew on the defensive front. Um, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't have and couldn't have done a better job against Crosby, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking this week against this Denver defense. So Dane, when you look at a guy like Pat Surtain, how do you balance not just letting him take away his side of the field by saying, well, as long as we don't go after him, we'll be fine, and almost giving them an advantage if you don't have some ability to attack it versus just saying, why would we even bother? We've got all
Mhm.
these other matchups that we might like and we can try to attack. So it's going to be interesting to see how they try to rotate and utilize him and who he's matching up against. Is that Christian Watson getting a lot of opportunities to line up against them? Is it Romeo Dobbs? Is it some other guys? But I certainly think that perhaps some of our secondary weapons could be in line for a big day. In addition to Aaron Jones, if he's fully healthy and can get a full workload this week, I think there could be some real opportunities for some of those guys, Jaden Reed, even a Dontavian Wicks,
Yeah.
certainly some of our young tight ends to get some looks. And I know I went strong with Musgrave and expecting him to have a breakout game in our last game. So maybe that doesn't necessarily happen to that degree, although I still maintain it's going to happen the week I don't predict it.
Mhm.
But certainly I think there's going to be some opportunities to exploit some mismatches against this Denver defense.
Yeah, no, I mean, Wags, anytime you talk about a defense and you say, well, you got to start somewhere, that makes me at least feel a little more confident, and then how we go about it. But it's reality, right? Is that this is not the Iron Curtain or anything, right? Or Steel Curtain, excuse me, or anything of that nature in Denver. Anything else on the Packers offensive side before we hop over to Packers D versus Russell Wilson, a familiar foe, and this Denver Broncos offense?
I don't think so. Let's dive over to the
Yeah.
offensive side of the Broncos against this Packers defense, and there's a little bit more talent on the offensive side of ball for the Broncos, and frankly, they played a little bit better, I think, on offense than they did last year.
Mhm.
So this is certainly not going to be a offense that the Packers can afford to take for granted either. The one thing that makes me a little bit nervous is we talked about the Packers defense being good, bad, depending on the week. Well, since the bye week was week 6, does that mean this is a good week for the offense, or because we didn't play a game or a defense is because we didn't play a game, we might get an inconsistent performance coming off the bye? I sure hope that these guys are dialed in, but sometimes a break from the routine can actually be harder on the defensive side than it is on the offensive side, as guys are not as locked in with film study, communication, reps, all those things that are so important for a defense, and typically why early in camp and in practices, defenses have an advantage over the offensive side of football. Well, same thing can be true coming off a bye, just with the opposite effect. So I really, truly hope, Dan, that this is a defense that's able to build on some momentum of what they did in that game against the Raiders, because if we can get some consistency, and if we can get performances like this defense put up against the Raiders most weeks the rest of the way, I like our chances
Yeah, me
for
too.
the offense to start to get some better performances and to build off of that. And I think there could be a lot of wins in the rest of this schedule if we're able to do that. Now, getting more into specifics with matchups, Dan, I think the strength of this Denver offense is certainly in their wide receivers. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton are the two headliners for this receiver group. So what do you think the Packers can do to try to neutralize that, particularly knowing that we might have a slightly hampered Jair Alexander?
Yeah, yeah. So this Broncos offense, I did a little bit of digging on what they've been up to. I don't claim to be a Broncos, aficionado by any stretch of the imagination, but they seem to start hot pretty quick. In each week, they've scored touchdowns on that first drive a fair amount of times this season, and then they just kind of fall off the map. So that's kind of an interesting thing just in its own right. We saw terrible Russell Wilson last year, and this year I think has been better from what I can tell, but he's still not the Russell Wilson, in Seattle that gave the Packers defense fits in the, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. All that's to say, it seems like he's had a little bit of trouble meshing with some of these receivers since he's come to Denver. And I agree. I think that Sutton and Jeudy are both very talented guys. There's a lot of rumors swirling about Jeudy maybe getting traded out of Denver before the trade deadline. That's not happening if the dude's balling out every week. And there's stuff going on, right? There's dysfunction going on with this offense. So even though on face value, I think that there is quite a bit of talent on this offense, there's some dysfunction with the Denver Broncos. And I'm not wise enough to know if this is an on week or an off week for the defense. But I will say that I'm not as concerned with Russell Wilson's legs as I was a couple of years ago with kind of his scramble ability. The running backs in Denver are adequate, but none of them scare me. And this wide receiver group against our DB group, I like the matchup. If Ja can go on one side and Razul can go on the other, I actually really like our matchup this week against this Denver, the Denver wide receivers. And then it goes down to Russell Wilson. Is he going to have time in the pocket? And a few years ago, it didn't matter if Russ had time in the pocket or not. He could kill you one way or another. He's not that same guy. And I think Rashawn Gary's been an absolute wrecking crew for this defense, but I expect other guys to continue to step up and grow as the season progresses as well. So, Wags, I think it's important that Jair plays against this wide receiver group, but I would say that of the guys that we've played so far this season, I'm actually less concerned about this holistically as a offense of any offense that we faced so far this season because of just the dysfunction they've shown week in and week out. From the team perspective, it just doesn't seem like they're meshing. They've got a new coach in Sean Payton. Things seem clunky in Denver right now, and that gives, I think, the Packers defense a little bit of good odds.
Yeah, this is a Denver offense that second in the league in pass plays over 40 yards and in top 5 in pass touchdowns. So that's really been where they've been buttering their bread. So certainly the matchups you mentioned seem to be matchups that we'll roll the dice with for sure. I think the Packers are going to have to be mindful of that deep portion of the field. So this could be a week where Packer fans just gear up to be a little bit anxious about not being able to hold an opposing run offense to less than 4.5, 5 yards per carry. I think if you're playing the matchups and you're playing the odds, which we have talked ad nauseum about looking for this defensive coaching staff to do, you've really got to focus on this Denver pass offense and maybe deprioritize the rushing offense a little bit compared to what you were doing against a team like the Raiders 2 weeks ago. So, Dane, it's not the most difficult offense that we're going to face this season. You're absolutely right about that. But they've certainly got a lot of guys that can excuse me, I can't talk tonight, can cause some issues for defenses if you're not communicating and on top of everything. I think the biggest thing for me, Dane, that I'd like to make sure is that we're not sloppy in terms of tackling coming off a bye, and that we don't have breakdowns where guys are getting wide open on plays just because of miscommunications. So those are two of the big keys for me. Is can we keep it clean or at least relatively clean on the defensive side of the ball coming out of this bye? I'll take my chances in getting maybe a couple of turnovers. Certainly you can say what you want about Russell Wilson, but he's someone that is pretty free with the football when you've got opportunities. So you've got to take advantage of those opportunities if he does and when he does give them to you. And then I think the last key for me, Dane, is what can we get? We talked about this during the bye week after that Raiders game, but what can we get in terms of reps from our defensive line beyond the starters? Because going to Mile High, that's a real thing. And if there's a situation where Denver, even if they're not putting up a ton of points, is able to start winning that time of possession battle, and the defense is out there for more snaps than you'd like to see, and the offense certainly has a part to play in that too, and keeping the defense on the sidelines. But that's I think a real key for this game is can the defense win some opportunities in third down situations, and are they able to rotate guys in on that defensive line, particularly so that they're fresh or ish in the second half, and not really starting to get worn down, in the thin air up in Denver. So I think you have to be prepared for that. That's a real advantage for the Broncos players is they're used to that and acclimated to that. And the Packers guys are going to have to figure out ways to stay fresh and hopefully not have to be stuck out on the football field for long stretches or losing that time of possession battle.
That's a really good point, and I get the feeling of necessity to play Kenny Clark as many snaps as you can, but we see it, and he's human. He wears down the more snaps he plays. I would love this week, in addition to Slayton and Devontae Wyatt, we've talked about Carl Brooks, getting maybe some more snaps there along the defensive line as well. He's just really stood out. So even if they work him in for an extra 5 to 10 wags, that's plenty extra, right? To kind of just keep working him in and rotate some guys in and out, because I don't care how good you are. Once you're gassed, you're gassed. And especially in that thin air, as you mentioned, it's not coming back that day. So I think that the coaching staff's going to have to be extra smart this week in how they do that rotation, especially with the big dogs up front.
All right, very good. Well, Dane, do you have any other thoughts matchup wise for the Packers defense against this Denver offense?
No, I don't. I mean, we should be better than Denver in both phases of the game. If you look on paper, I think we are, but that's why you play the game. So I fully expect the Packers to come out and ball, and there's only so much you can say, right? I mean, this is a team that we don't know exactly what we have. It's going to say a lot about the character of the team. I think the coaching staff and the mentality of a young offense and a more veteran defense, how they come out, and if they're flying around or if they come out flat, because this team can't afford to come out flat.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Dane, I'm being mindful of your illness, and we're actually making record time here, I think, in a preview podcast. So it's time. Let's get into our Leap Spirits X Factors and score predictions of the week. And all of you that are following along here in our live streams, please feel free to throw your X Factor predictions on both sides of the ball into the chat. Throw in your score prediction for this week's game. We'll try to highlight a few of those here if you put them in there. But Dane, I'm just going to lead this off. I'm going to give you a moment to collect your brain freeze. And I'm going to start on the offense side of the ball with my offensive X factor. Highlighted a little bit and kind of alluded to it. But I'm going to go with Romeo Doubs. I think this is a big Romeo Doubs week. And certainly having a fully healthy Christian Watson. I think we worked through that. Okay, we've got Watson back. We want to get him the ball, but I think it's just a matter of matchups in this one. And I really think that Romeo Doubs is also going to be a guy that can be a big target to help Jordan Love get some rhythm and consistency in moving the chains. And so I think he might be looking his way a little bit more even than he typically does in a given week, both to exploit the matchups and to get some rhythm. In addition to that, I think Romeo Doubs is a guy that can really benefit from Aaron Jones's return. So instead of the Packers facing long down and distance situations quite as often as, at least I'm hoping they don't this week against Denver. Perhaps we're in more 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3, or 3rd and short. And so Romeo Doubs, as a guy that can get open in those underneath routes and those shorter routes, becomes infinitely more valuable to Jordan Love and enabling to move the chains and for the offense to stay out there on field and keep those drives going. So I think Romeo Doubs is going to get a lot of targets this week. Hopefully he can make the most of those opportunities and have a big game. And for that reason, I'm going with Romeo Doubs as my offensive X factor of the week.
It's a great choice. I'll stick with wide receiver. I'm going to take your boy Jaden Reed because I think a wide receiver is going to blow up this week. I really do. And I just, I think that there's a lot of vulnerability this defensive backs for Denver. So maybe it's Doubs, and I love that. But I'll go with Jaden Reed because he's shown so many flashes so far of a guy who can be electric with the ball in his hands. Maybe coming out of the bye week, maybe they give him a couple more end arounds, get the ball in his hands a little bit, work him back in, get a little more creative with him, and that opens some other things up for him down the field going into the second half. So I'm just going to go with Jaden Reed because gut tells me a wideout's going to have a big day, and I think Jaden Reed's due for a big one for Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Dane, I'm not going to be sad if that
I didn't think
happens.
so.
And heck, even though he didn't make the list for this week, a guy like Dontavian Wicks,
Yes,
if
he's
you want to
close.
get the run game going, he might get some more snaps, and with that could come some more, opportunities in the pass game as well. So I'm prepared for any of those things, and let's just say that if any of those things happen, I will be a very, very happy Packer fan come on Sunday.
Yeah.
All right, defense, Dane. I don't know if you've got a guy
I
picked
do.
out here, but I'm going to let you take the lead on your defensive X factor.
Yeah, so we talk about rotating guys in and out, and in our Insta chat, cold lunch cards mentioned JJ Enigbare, and I think he's a great selection this week. I'm going to go with that. I think that Enigbare has had some really nice performances the last couple of weeks. He's been stronger in the run game as well. I think as the last couple of weeks, he's growing into that role. But Wags, Rashawn Gary is always a wrecking crew, right? But I think that it's going to open up other guys. And you mentioned that thin air in Denver. And I think this is a week where the Packers defense could be rotating guys in a ton. We've seen it the last couple of weeks where Van Ness and Enigbare get some run one series, then it's Preston Smith and Rashawn the next. So this week, I just think that Enigbare might be on the opposite of Rashawn for a couple snaps. He's going to, be able to chase some guys down. He's just going to have a day, and he's going to, I'm not saying he's going to have 4 sacks against Russell Wilson, because even now, Russell's still pretty elusive, but I think that he can be a difference maker and cause some headaches for this Denver Bronco offense. So JJ Enigbare at edge is my defensive X factor.
Dane, we were basically aligned in lockstep with our selections, just different guys in the same position group. I'm going with Lucas Van Ness, Hercules, and I gotta say, this is a guy that I think just has been a gamer so far early this season, and he's been out there, he's made some impact plays, and I think he just keeps getting better and better every week. Honestly, he's been fighting through a couple of nicks and injuries, just like a lot of guys, but I think his even more so. And that hasn't kept him off the field. So I think a bye week has probably done him an awful lot of good, especially someone in their rookie season, long camp, going through 5 weeks, just to get us a breath and get a breather. I think Lucas Van Ness, honestly, what I've seen from him is not like anything rookie defensive player of the year or anything like that so far. I'm not going to get carried away. However, I do think that Lucas Van Ness is going to be poised for some really, really good football the rest of the way. So I hope I'm not wrong in making that prediction, but I think, I think about his ability to run guys down. Same thing that he did when he ran down Justin Fields against the Bears in week 1. Probably the last time he was truly fresh. Fields thought he could outrun him in the flat and get around the corner. Russell Wilson, kind of the same way. Lucas Van Ness, he's got the speed, he's got the size, he's got the reach, he's got the grip and the strength. Guys aren't going to get away from him when he gets them in their grasp. So I think Lucas Van Ness is someone that could have a really high impact in this game, both in the rush defense and as a pass rusher, to be able to contain a guy like Russell Wilson and to be able to give opportunities for some of his other teammates up front to find gaps and find opportunities to close in that pass rush. So Lucas Van Ness is my defensive X factor this week against the Broncos.
Great choice. And you're hot tonight, Wags. I think keep going. What do you got for a score prediction, man?
Oh, dang. So I'm just going to keep this short. Honestly, we've been talking about this. You posed the big question at the beginning. How big of a game is this for the Packers? If the Packers want to be taken seriously as a team to at least be in the discussion to get into the playoffs this year, you got to win this game. Now, I know I gave a lot of qualifiers about how the Packers have to play well every week to have a chance to win, and that's all true. But the fact of the matter is, if they want to be taken seriously, they got to win this game. They're not going to be able to climb out of a hole if you can't finish off a game against the Broncos. I don't care if it's on the road. I don't care if they have a mini bye. I don't care if they've
There's no
started
excuses.
to play a little bit better. This is a week you've got to play well. You've got to go. You've got to take care of business, win a football game. So I am quietly optimistic that the offense finds some rhythm with the return of Aaron Jones this week. If he is able to go, which we do expect that he'll be able to. And I think the offense put some points up the board. Packers 31, Broncos 23, go on the road, take care of business, put one in the left-hand column.
That'd be great. If we could put up 31, I saw John in our chat also said 31 for the Pack, which I love that. It's a great number. I got a slightly lower Wags, but we're in the same neighborhood. I got 27-17 Packers. It's going to be maybe start a little bit slow, but I think that Jordan, the offense settles in. You mentioned Aaron Jones, and I just think offensively they settle in. They get a couple big plays too out of either breakdown or just mismatches offensive against the Denver defense, and Packers get some points this week. So I got 27-17, and the Packers are able to move to 3-3 on the year.
All right. Well, two more winning predictions for Dane and Wags here. So, folks, thanks so much for joining us in the chat coming up that bye week. Dane, I hope you feel better. I give you the award, the podcasting award for the night. You got the gold star. So congratulations on a amazing, gutsy performance. Really appreciate you coming through. And I think that's good vibes, good karma for the Packers come Sunday. So, folks, as always, be legendary and go Pack, go.
Pack, go.
Every year I know we gonna go hard. We been that team ever since Bart started. All my cheese heads go Pack, go. Ain't showing no mercy, cutting no slack, no. I ain't a bad sport and I'll even wish you good luck. Only thing I will